Hello everyone, welcome to our first online class of APSET English Paper 2 preparation. Today we are beginning an important unit called as the Schools of Criticism, and our first topic is formalism. So before we learn what is formalism, let's understand why criticism exists at all. So what is literary criticism means? Criticism means the study, interpretation and evaluation of literature. When we read a poem or a novel, we may simply enjoy the story, but critics try to find how the text creates meaning through its structure, language, tone and imagery. Different groups of critics develop different ways to analyze literature. These groups are known as the schools of criticism. So one of the most earliest and influential among them is formalism. So let's see what is formalism. Formalism, the word formalism comes from form. It means that the critics focuses mainly on the form and structure of the text. That is, how it is written rather than what it is about. In short, formalism believes that the text is self-sufficient. To understand it, we don't need to know about the author's life, the time in which it was written, or the reader's feelings. All we need is to study the text itself, its words, rhythm, patterns, symbols, and imagery. That is why formalism is often summarized by the phrase, "The text itself is the primary source of meaning." I'll repeat this, that the text itself is the primary source of meaning. So we must focus on only the text, its words, rhythm, patterns, symbols and imagery, not about the author or any other topic. So the text itself is the primary source of meaning. This is what formalism is. So the next is origin of formalism. Formalism began in Russia during the early 20th century, around 1915. A group of critics known as the Russian Formalists developed this approach. Important names include Viktor, Roman, Boris and Yuri. Later, in the United States, related movement, a movement called as the New Criticism appeared during the 1930s to the 1950s. Prominent critics in this group were John Crow, Lynthbrook, I.A. Richards, and T.S. Eliot. So, although Russian formalism and American New Criticism developed independently, but both believed that a literary work should be studied as a complete and autonomous structure. So let's move on to the main idea of formalism. So the key principles are one by one as follows. The first is the autonomy of the text. The literary work stands on its own. Everything needed to interpret it is found inside the text. The second is the form and the structure. Like a building made of bricks, every word and the sentence contribute to the whole structure of the text. So a good critic studies how all these parts combine to create unity. So it's about the form and the structure and autonomy of the text. So the next is the defamiliarization. So introduced by Viktor, it means making the familiar appear strange. That is, so defamiliarization means making the familiar appearance strange. Writers use unusual language and imagery so that readers see ordinary things in a new and a fresh way. For example, calling a clock the heart that never sleeps. It's an example of defamiliarization. So the next is the literariness. What makes a piece of writing literary is not its topic but its use of language. Means when a text is written or a writing, when we closely analyze that writing, we see a pattern of sound, rhythm, figures, speech, and patterns are being used in any text. Like different readers use different types of patterns and styles or rhythms to write their writings. So that is the literariness. The next is the objective analysis. Critics must focus on how a text produces meaning, not on their personal emotions or the author's intentions. So, an author, whenever he writes something, he must focus on the objective, whatever objective he might have. So, he must focus on it, he or she must focus on it, and keep in mind and don't move from the objective of that particular writing. So let's move on to the next thing, that is the new criticism and its concepts. So the American movement called new criticism continued the same ideas. It introduced a few famous terms, that is the close reading. First is the close reading, a detailed examination of the text, language, imagery, and structure. What is close reading? That American movement, which is called as the new criticism, introduced. That is, first is the close reading. That is, we must closely examine how the text, language, or imagery, or how the structure of the text is. The second is the organic unity. Every part of a good poem or a story fits together naturally, like organs in a body. So we can say a text, a poem, or may it be a story, is like a good poem or a story whenever it fits together naturally. If it doesn't fit together naturally, its parts are moving from one objective to another objective, then it is not termed as a good poem or a story. So organic unity must be present. Next is the intentional fallacy. We should not judge a poem by what the author intended to say. Some poems are like in favor of something, some poems are for like opposing any idea. So we must not judge the intentions of the writer. Next is the affective fallacy. We should not judge it by how we feel or while reading it. So, for new critics, literature was a well woven pattern of meaning, best understood through careful reading. So, careful reading was one of the main thing that was done by the critics by following certain things like close reading, organic unity must be there, intentional fallacy is there or not, and effective fallacy should be considered, and a well-woven pattern of a meaning of that particular text was extracted or said to be found. By keeping in mind these rules, so we must move on the next thing, that is the example to understand formalism. Suppose we take Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. The phrase is like, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So here a formalist would not ask who the beloved was or what Shakespeare felt. Instead, the critic would analyze the structure, 14 lines, iambic pentameter, and the images, that is the summer, beauty, time in it, the contrast, the mortal life versus the immortal art. And by studying the form and the language, the critic finds meaning within the poem itself. So for finding the meaning of the poem, the critic use structure, imagery, and contrast of that writing and try to extract its meaning without criticizing that writing or a poem or a story, whatever it might be. So next is the importance of formalism. Formalism changed the way people read literature. Before this moment, Critics focused on biography, history, or the moral lessons. Formalist taught readers to pay attention to words, style, and structure, a method that influenced later theories like structuralism and post-structuralism. For your TSET exam, understand these concepts which help you analyze text objectively and answer the theoretical questions accurately. So, if you are preparing for this ESET exam, understand these concepts which help you understand or analyze the text. Use these techniques to even prepare for your exam. Whichever exam it might be SET or NET or TET, whichever exam you are preparing for, you can use these rules for studying for that particular exam. So let's move on to the next thing, that is the limitations of formalism. However, formalism is not perfect. Critics argue that it ignores the author and history, it overlooks the reader's experience, and treats literature like a scientific object instead of cultural expression. So these are the limitations of formalism, that it ignores author and history completely. It overlooks the reader's experience. It doesn't bother about what the reader thinks about the text, and treats literature like a scientific object, based on rules and words, its meaning, and just objective things, but not the feelings, emotions of the author or the reader. Anything such like this is not considered at all. Still, it is a method of close reading, remains the foundation of literary study today. So let's move on to the quick recap. So the first is focus, the text itself, its form and language. Next is the origin. Origin was from the Russian formalism 1915 onwards. Key critics are Shklovsky, Jakobson, Brooks, Iyer Richards. Next are the key terms is defamiliarization, literariness, organic unity, intentional fallacy. Approach is the objective or the text-centered analysis, only text-centered analysis, not the feelings, emotions or intentions and thoughts of the reader or the writer. Next is the limitation. It ignores author, reader and social context. The limitations of this is it ignores author, reader and the social context. So that's our detailed explanation of formalism, a topic that is the first topic from the schools of criticism. So the foundation for modern literary criticism is formalism. So in our next class we'll study about the structuralism, which is another school of criticism. So structuralism, which develops from these formalist ideas but looks at language and meaning in a broader cultural system. Thank you for listening. Revise today's concept and try doing a close reading of any short poem you like. See you in the next session. Goodbye.